We are live.
Oh, great.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I have Steve here. He came across my For You page on TikTok, and I was just completely drawn to the type of spiritual information that he was putting out there. It's very unique, and I think it's much deeper than a lot of these spiritual teachers teach. Although I know you say you're not a spiritual teacher, but I feel like a lot of people on this path are students and teachers kind of simultaneously.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have you on here and chat. I know we had a conversation, what was that, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was, yeah, 2 weeks ago.
And so we got kind of into it, and then we were like, we have to stop and like save this for the interview. So I guess, just start out by saying who you are. And I'd really like to dive into kind of like the very, very beginning of your spiritual awakening and how you kind of figured out that you were on that path.
Sure. So to everybody watching, my name is Steve, and I mostly post on TikTok. I've got about 48,000 followers, and so that's where I mostly post my videos. And then I also post on Instagram. Some people don't like TikTok, right? And my YouTube, I'm still figuring that out. So it's kind of messy right now. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. And I said I'm not a spiritual teacher, but it's kind of sometimes it's like overcomplicating it. Okay, like I am a spiritual teacher. And actually, this is what I love to talk about the most. It's like exciting to me. That's why I do sessions with clients, because it's incredibly enjoyable. So that's why I do this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I know. I love it so much. I know we were talking about, we were FaceTiming the other week about how like we can just go on and on about this stuff for hours. So yeah, tell me a little bit about how your path started, or like how you realized you were kind of, starting like a spiritual awakening. I know it's very different for everyone.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's interesting looking back because it took a long time for me to even hear the words awakening and these types of things. And so the very first thing that I started to watch, which I'm sure everybody has heard of, is Abraham Hicks teaching about manifestation, law of attraction. But now looking back, I can now see what I actually was able to learn from that. I liked the idea, like we all do, that we're going to be able to manifest everything that we want. But interestingly, I was more fascinated with, I would use the information, now I know, for awareness. And so, certain things like she would talk about momentum, how you could be perfectly feeling fine. And then if, let's say, you focus on something very scary, like the news or something, then, she would say it would lower your vibration, and you could watch it happen in your body if you gave it enough attention. And the momentum would grow. So it's like you're fine, then you're a little bit worse, and suddenly you are fearful, let's say. And so I actually tested that in a number of ways. And everything that I would learn from them, I would kind of put into practice. But the most important thing was that I was using these things to create more and more awareness of myself. So it's kind of funny to look back that it was so focused on manifestation, when in reality, that was not what was the most interesting for me. It was more the awareness thing.
I love that. It's so interesting because it's like, I feel like every time you start to go down this path and you might go in like this direction, and then it like pivots you this way. And then you look back and you're like, well, actually, I thought I was getting this out of it, but I'm actually getting this out of it. So I love that, because I feel like the biggest part of if you want to call it like an awakening journey, is the insane self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like that's like simultaneously the best and the worst part. Then, you figure out kind of like why you are the way you are. And then it's like, if it's things that you kind of want to change, you have to kind of dig deep and figure out, okay, well, how do I don't want to say correct those things, but alter them so that it betters your life experience. So yeah, that's kind of tough. So what was like your biggest side of with your own self? Like what was a big like aha moment for you revolving around your own spiritual like self-awareness?
Wow, that's a good question. Like one thing immediately pops to mind, which is it's a little bit long, but I'll try to make it quick. So
no need.
I just talked about Abraham Hicks and how I was using that for awareness. And it was one particular day, it's so clear in my mind that everything she talked about finally clicked, but I could see it. It was in my direct experience. So I had been doing this computer job for this guy, And as I was driving, I was still not very aware of myself and what I was doing and my choices, and even in driving, right? The choices that I make.
Yeah.
So it was funny that on the way, I started to notice, because I had watched probably 60 hours of Abraham Hicks because I was so obsessed, that it finally kind of clicked into place. And then I thought to myself, oh no, I was going to say, as I kept driving to the office, a number of things happened, basically spiraled out of control. So let's say if I was in a rush and I kind of blew through the red light and there was a red light camera, immediately I thought, oh my God, that's like a $300 fine or something. And then as I kept going, so basically I'm making choices that I'm not conscious of. So why would I be rushing? Like the guy didn't say come in a rush, but I was doing that. And so a few things like that happened. And then I started to see the momentum and I'm like, oh my God, I was feeling fine. And then this choice made it worse, and this choice. And then that was that was incredible, because it was the first time that I could see it in direct experience. So until you see it directly, it's sort of just information. Okay, this sounds nice. But in that moment, I was like, I cannot believe that if you become more conscious, before you take an action, you stop even for 2 seconds and you think, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't rush. And then I would have slowed down. I wouldn't have, gone through the red light. And so it's like an endless, you could call it synchronicity if you want, or kind of negative synchronicity. Yeah. So that's one moment. Yeah.
That's amazing though, that it was such a small little thing, like rushing around when you're driving, that could, it's almost like this domino effect where it like kind of like what you were saying with like the momentum, and it goes on and on and on, and you can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper until you're just like, and then you start to, I don't know, like if you've done this, it sounds like you probably have, where like I started doing that with everything, like every little voice, every little feeling. Like say I was having a kind of like not so great day, and then all of this like sudden I realized like I'm not in a good mood, and what I would do is trace it back. Okay, like when did this mood shift, and was there, what could I have done differently so that I wasn't feeling this way? But then it goes into the whole paradox of like, you're not always going to feel good all the time, and that's just part of like the human experience. And I think that's been like a really big frustration of mine with watching all these different spiritual like teachers or whatever you want to call them, where it's like this toxic positivity.
Oh yeah,
like that drives me crazy. And I know you actually spoke about that in one of your videos, not necessarily toxic positivity, but what's the right word? When you're feeling like high vibration versus low vibration.
Oh yeah, that video.
Yeah, and that was a really good one that stuck out to me, because it's like, I think so many people that are on this path, they think if they're not feeling like 100% happy and positive and butterflies all the time, that they're either going backwards.
Oh yeah.
Or they're just like, oh, I'm not doing things right. Did you ever feel that way? Like when you were your path? Yeah.
I think it's kind of universal. Everybody, I think, goes through that. So the toxic positivity is so interesting, because basically we learn that only one side of reality is okay, which is the good side, the light. And then we immediately start rejecting the darkness. And I used to say this a long time ago, when you reject darkness, that is darkness. So often we think that we are in the light, and then, but I said this in one of my videos, I think I deleted it, but it was like, the light would never reject the darkness, because light is light. Light would just embrace it.
Yeah.
And so the act of resisting or not wanting to look at is darkness itself. It's unconsciousness. You don't want to look at it, right? So yeah, but for sure I experienced that.
Like those little nuggets, like when I hear like from you or like someone else, I'm just like, that's amazing. Yeah. So how do you combat that? Like if you're having a down, I don't want to say day, but maybe like a period or a season or whatever, what are some things you do maybe to make yourself feel better, or to kind of work alongside the darkness? Like what would you recommend to other people that are going through something like that?
That's a complex question, because it so depends
aren't they all?
where the person is. So it's like almost like there could be like 20 different answers depending on where the person is. But I think if somebody is open, because it depends. Sometimes when the person is at a stage where they really only want to hear about love and light, which is okay if the person is kind of a little bit stuck in that, there's nothing wrong with that. But if they're a little bit more open and they actually are interested, like, oh, the darkness maybe is not just evil, it's not just bad for no reason. Darkness is literally something that was rejected, and then the rejection, which is a disconnection, is incredibly painful. It's actually like torture. And so you could think of even the idea of a demon. You can, people automatically, they just want to see it as a demon. Oh, it's just evil for no reason. And in reality, a demon would be like the ultimate wounded child, you could say. Or so it's like even a demon is not just evil, or so I think that's an interesting way to put it, I think, because it's like both light and dark are actually sort of one. It's a little
Yeah.
hard to understand because you think light is, oh, just angels and these things, and then demons are separate, but you could
Sorry.
almost so yeah, I think it's an interesting. Oh yeah, but your question was like, what would I recommend to people?
Yeah, like say, okay, let's go with the obvious right now, the state of the world.
Yeah,
I know you're in Canada, right?
yeah,
So obviously we're dealing with different things, but it's all relatively the same within like the collective consciousness. Like with people who are feeling really dark and down and
yeah.
fearful of everything that's going on right now, like how would you recommend to like deal with it and so they don't continue to spiral and spiral, but so th're not simultaneously like running away from it, hence making
Yeah.
it worse.
So actually, I just thought of something because I'll just share what happened to me. So depending on where you are, it is weird because so let's say that you are kind of a beginner, right, and you're into spirituality. What I literally did, and remember, I didn't know any better. So now I'm talking about it, after years and years.
Yeah.
I think it was actually that's what it was supposed to happen. So literally when I started to learn about Abraham Hicks, and it was sort of toxic positivity, but it was necessary for a period of time because sometimes because of our trauma and our life, we are kind of drowning in darkness and suffering. And so it's actually okay, especially in the beginning, if you almost actually avoid negativity at all costs for a period of time, right? Because literally you need to stop drowning a little bit. And I think usually what happens, it's not an exact science, but when you do that, that's like sort of the first stage. And when you've had enough kind of positivity and you've
Yeah.
kind of
You like feel a little sick, like okay.
stopped watching the news, and you sort of do only things that make you feel good, eventually you have a little bit of a bliss stage, which is when you feel more amazing than you could ever have imagined like it was possible. And then the funny thing is when you experience that, the ego says, "Oh my God, I think it's done. Like the whole journey, I've reached the destination. I'm going to be happy like this forever." And that's only the very, very beginning, right? So I would say that, like, if you're kind of drowning in darkness and suffering, it may be beneficial for, I don't know how long, a few months, to see what happens if you actually purposefully say, "I'm not going to watch this and this and this. I'm not going to do this and that." And then I would watch, for example, literally videos and pictures of Hawaii because it's one of my favorite places, and it's not triggering at all. It's just nature. And I would put on like really nice music, and then I would even kind of test it, and I could literally feel myself feeling better and better and better until I had like tears of joy from literally just doing that. So I
Wow.
basically proved to myself that it was possible to literally give your attention to something and then change the way you feel. So yeah, for a period of time, and then later on, the hardest part starts, which is all the darkness, right? That you have
Yeah.
to.
The shadow work, the dark night of
Yeah,
the soul, all that kind of stuff. I actually love that advice because I feel like because we're so indoctrined from like when we were born, we
yeah,
don't know the difference. We don't know what it feels like to turn off the news or be away from people that feed into our negativity or that are around the victim mindset. And so it's really uncomfortable at first to kind of step away from those things. But I agree with you where there comes a point where you can start to slowly integrate it back. But
yeah,
then you become so aware of like over time what makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad. And like sometimes I'll indulge in like the badness. Like I have a degree in journalism, so like I wanted to be on the news. So Sometimes I'll indulge in it and then I'll realize like how much it's affecting my mental health. And then I will just completely shut it off for like a week, a month, whatever, until I can like integrate it back in.
Yeah.
So I really love that advice because a lot of us don't know what it's like to step away from all of the noise and the chaos in our lives.
And I was just going to say one thing, which is you said sometimes it's hard to step away from it. And a long time ago, I made certain videos talking about something kind of like this. And people would say things like, if I don't watch this, like an atrocity, I'm literally like being a bad person. And so I have to literally witness this. So
Mm.
that's an interesting element. A lot of people, I think, feel that way. So it's like if there's a war happening somewhere and I choose to never watch anything about it, I'm a bad person. And it's interesting because once you go deeper and deeper, you realize how much we are all so deeply hurt. And so when you think about that perspective, that you kind of want to watch something that makes you feel bad because you're being a good person, but you're forgetting about yourself. And the
Mm.
reason why people forget about themselves when they say something like that is because they actually haven't seen how deeply hurt they are. And so they think they're fine. And so because they think they're fine, I can watch a million hours of this and they won't even notice how it makes them feel. So this whole dynamic exists, right?
Yeah, that's so true. I don't know. I feel like for me, at least on my journey, it's been a lot of experimentation.
Oh yeah.
Like I almost feel like that's all that it is. And
Mhm.
it's funny because I know when we talked about it before, it's like the more you learn about yourself and all the different layers of not only you, but other people of the world, whatever, it's like the more that you don't know. And
Yeah, that's a paradox. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like this, I don't know, like for me, it's like this huge thirst for knowledge that
Yeah.
just is can never be satiated. Like I just always want to know more about whatever topic I'm infatuated by, like in that moment. And I think a part of that too is, have you ever heard of like, are you familiar with mirror neurons?
Say that again.
Mirror neurons, like in your brain?
No, mirror. No, I never heard of that.
Oh, you'll love this. So it's like a big thing that I study that I'm interested in. And it's basically like imagine it's snowing, right? And you take a sled at the top of a hill and no one's been down the hill yet. It's just like fresh powder. And you take the sled and you try to go down. It's not really going to be like a quick, smooth ride. Like it's probably going to be a little bumpy. It's going to take a little push to get down.
Yeah.
Imagine that being like the neurons in your brain firing off. So when we are conditioned to watch the news or feel this way or whatever negative thing we have going on, we've gone down that path so many times that it's a smooth sailing ride and it's comfortable and we're used to
Yeah.
it. And so then when you try to uh, create new mirror neurons in your brain or neural pathways, it can start to it's like re-putting a new path in, so it's not as smooth, and so
Yeah.
we tend to go back to the pathway that's more comfortable.
Yeah.
And so it's like where our brains are so like accustomed to going down the one sledding path and that it takes effort and consciousness and um like you just have to do your best to create the new pathway and make that one as smooth or smoother than the one that we've already created in our brains.
Yeah, that's I love this topic because what came to mind is this idea of wiring. Um, some of the most challenging things that you can face on the awakening path is, for example, challenging your parents or facing certain things with your parents. I think it's for everybody, right? It's like some people like they have no boundaries with their parents, and so even imagining that they would head over to their parents' house and then have a conversation like that, especially knowing that they're probably not very open-minded a lot of the times, um, that's literally I mean, there could be so many different types of wiring related to the parents, but some of the wirings, like let's say if you had a parent that was very aggressive, and obviously as a child, you would feel terrified of this parent, right?
Right.
There's literally a wiring. I mean, I'm kind of making this up, but it would be described kind of like if this was your mother, for example, and you're actually deeply terrified of her, even as an adult, right? Even as
Mhm.
there's a wiring that would say something like, never cross your mother, never do anything to displease, like, nothing. Don't say something that she's not going to like. And so if this is very embedded in this wiring, and then you go and do that, it can be the most terrifying thing that you do. And when you do that, it's kind of like what you were saying, it's replacing the wiring. That happened to me. That's when I started to have the most severe panic attacks. I never had them in my life, because you can kind of imagine, like, it's such a strong wiring, and that wiring has to do with your survival. So it doesn't really make sense when we hear it as adults. Like, to the child, the wiring is never go against your mother or your father, or you will die. And
Right.
often this doesn't make sense, because our mind will say, well, but they wouldn't have actually killed me, right? My parents wouldn't do that. But that's not what a child experiences. So a 4-year-old who is around a parent who is rageful, in their body, they feel that they're in physical danger. So the terror that is, so if a child experiences that, the terror is part of the wiring, and it's in there. And so that's why you're so scared of that parent, because you're literally going against your survival if you say something against that parent. That's why it's probably the hardest thing to do.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a good point, because it's so deeply in there that it's
Yeah.
like, well, and then we're like, well, why am I so scared to like stand up to this person or say this or set a boundary even?
Yeah.
That's a big thing that I've been going through the past, like, I don't know, maybe year and a half, is working on boundaries, because I realized I just didn't have any. Like, that was like a really big realization, that I was like, yeah, this is a problem. But that's like the beauty of going deep with yourself and finding that self-awareness and where your triggers are and all those things, because you can't change what you're not aware of,
Yeah.
So what is it, what are you focusing on right now? Like, what's your infatuation right now?
Let me try, let me try to remember. Sometimes I like literally. Okay, let me see. Well, one thing that I'm doing, um, it's sort of, you could call it shadow work. I've been doing this for a long time, and it seems that there's always a deeper level, and usually that it's deeper, because you can either feel a little bit of like trepidation or something. It's going deeper. So for me, what's kind of funny is, so I could be watching certain videos and I get triggered, right? But the funny thing is, even when I say that word trigger, often people think that it's this huge explosion, right? Which is sort of what people think that is. But in reality, it could be very subtle. So I usually kind of like visual. So let's say that I'm watching something, and then I don't like, my ego doesn't like something that person said. Imagine that this is a little bit of anger, right? Just popping up, but very subtle and very small. And if you don't look at it and you pretend, and you're like, the classic thing, I'm fine, which means like, right? So you don't look at it, you sort of like, you kind of pretend that it's not happening, and then you probably watch the next video, and then that's it. And so what I've been practicing, I've done this for a long time, but now it's like the most extreme. This is a practice of being brutally honest about what's happening in here. Like, there's no more hiding, right? Like, and it's funny, because as you advance or you progress spiritually, something also happens. So it's like, technically you have the bliss stage, and then you think that it's over when it's just the very beginning. And then there's like a huge amount of darkness. And then after the peak, this is my experience, right? Maybe people have different experiences. After the peak, that's when you sort of start to experience not really bliss, but it's starting to get better again. More permanent, because that was sort of a little taste, whereas you went through the darkness, so now it's more permanent, and it slowly becomes more permanent, right? Like a state of well-being. And so it's so hard. For example, only very recently, after probably 2 years of hell, like going through a dark night of the soul that lasted a whole year, only very, very recently do I feel kind of a permanent peace. Not absolute. There's always little things.
Never is.
And if I go into deep meditation, then there's still a lot of stuff, a lot of pain and rage and everything. So going back to what I was saying, so the practice that I'm doing is, if I feel triggered, and even if it's tiny, right, the ego loves to pretend, oh, it's nothing. But when I look at it, what I do is, there's a person in the video, right? So what I do is I pretend that I'm talking to the person, and it's really, I'm not going to say much of it, but it could be as nasty as I want it to be. It depends on what I'm feeling. because we hide from these things, especially on a spiritual journey, because we want to be angels.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so literally what I'll say, so I'll share one, which is actually funny because I say it. So I kind of almost like an actor, I embody it. And then I just laugh because it's funny.
Because it's like so extreme. You're like, damn, where'd that come from?
Yeah. So I was watching a live, and it was one of my favorite spiritual teachers, and he was talking to someone, and the person kept interrupting him, but like it was basically his style. I don't know what was happening, but it was just interrupting, and I didn't like that, right? So I thought to myself, I feel something here. Let me see what I can say. You can even play a game and ask yourself, like, this part of your ego, what do you really want to say? Just say it. Like, just say whatever you want. And then I pointed at the person on the screen and I said, "You're a terrible listener." Right? I said it much worse than I'm saying it. The moment that I said it, the point of the practice is there's a part of me that's a terrible listener, and that's why I didn't like that. That's the reflection. So it's like the moment that I see someone. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that's interesting. No, keep going. I'm just processing.
Yeah, so it's like I'm watching someone kind of interrupting, and the person, it's his channel, he wasn't bothered at all. So it's kind of like, okay, there's no problem. But why am I so bothered by that? And when I said, "You're a terrible listener," immediately I remembered how many times I'm speaking and maybe I don't even want the person to, let's say somebody else is saying something, and inside of me is like, I'm waiting for me to talk. So that's a terrible listener. I don't do that all the time. And with more awareness, of course, that's very limited. But that's so every time that you do this kind of practice, but you do it so blatantly that it's so ridiculous that it becomes obvious that the reflection is now just point back at yourself. So "you're a terrible listener" means I'm a terrible listener. And I don't like to see that part of me that I haven't looked at yet. So that's
Wow. I'm going to have to try that. So this is actually, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I feel like that's actually something that I struggle, that concept of projection is something that I struggle to really fully grasp. For example, if say there's some, I don't know, someone that goes out and like murders someone else, right?
Yeah.
And you feel anger and sadness and all of these things towards that person.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's also like is there a line where it stops being a projection, or is there something to look at in there with something like extreme like that?
I love this question. Yeah, because so it is funny when you go to the extreme, because the mind will say it doesn't make sense. Like if they're a murderer and I'm not, then it's not a projection, but it's not really literal usually. Sometimes it can be very, like I said, "You're a terrible listener" means I'm a terrible listener. It's like an equal kind of mirroring. But when it comes to that, I've also made videos talking about that, and people really didn't like that because they kind of want to keep believing. This is what's funny. The ego has to divide everything into hierarchy. So good and bad is a big one. And so you have to categorize people as bad so that you can be good. Otherwise, if there is no categories, then you can't hold on to that, right? So that's like sort of the first thing. But then if you want to talk specifically about the murderer aspect and the violence and the cruelty, basically it would take a very deep exploration of your mind, because it's very scary to see this stuff in you. You wanna believe that there's nothing in you that could even think of doing something like that, right? There's kind of like a difference between having something in your mind or your consciousness and then actually doing it like those people, right? I don't know exactly why. I have found parts like that in myself and worse, and yet I would never harm a fly. So I don't know why some people, it almost seems like they're possessed by that part of their ego.
Right.
I don't know. But the part of the cruelty and the murder, if you go extremely deep into your rage is connected to powerlessness, right? So when we anger is one of the healthy emotions, and usually when you get angry, especially as a child, you have a very valid reason. So it's like a child felt, let's say they have a sibling, and they felt that the parents were giving the sibling a lot of attention and they felt ignored or abandoned. That is a legitimate reason to have anger. I mean, it's always legitimate pretty much.
Right.
But, that's like very legitimate. It's like the child can't communicate that, but they're saying, I'm feeling abandoned here, and it's like breaking my heart. So I'm getting angry so that you can. The anger is actually supposed to. It's sort of like this. It's like something wrong is happening, and the anger is kind of like something should be done about it, not in a negative way, but you should communicate. Something should be done to correct this. And
Yeah.
so when a child, which is the most common thing in the world, when a child gets angry, the parents get angry. It's like, how dare you? I'm the authority, so you don't deserve to even feel anger. That's when you start bottling up the anger, and then anger turns to rage, because that's rage is just like bottled up anger, right? Over,
Right. Like compounded.
yeah, compounded, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I forgot what the if you can remind me, sometimes that happens to me.
I literally was just thinking the same thing. Like, what did I even ask?
Oh,
Oh,
I
the murder thing and the projection.
yeah. So the rage thing. So let's say that, because it's connected to the murder thing. When you experience that in your childhood, so if you are completely punished and the parents actually become aggressive, so you also feel threatened, that's going to happen hundreds of times, because you're going to be with your parents, right, for at least until you're 18. And so that is a huge amount of anger that is pushed down, like I said, hundreds, maybe thousands of times. And
Right.
so when it turns to rage, most people never even come into contact with it, right? And when people have a lot of rage, that's the people that you see road rage and doing certain things. They're actually kind of possessed by their rage. They
Yeah.
have no clue what anger is, because they didn't learn about it. When they felt it, the message they got was, ignore it. You're not allowed to feel this. So because you don't develop a relationship with the anger, you have no clue about what it even feels like. So that's why people are kind of possessed by that energy. But when
Wow.
you're going into a deep spiritual awakening and then you start accessing the rage, like for me, I never even had anger my entire life because of how suppressed I was. When I went very deep into my rage, which is connected to powerlessness, which is so painful, you will find those parts there. And so in
Mm.
this, there will be a part, especially related to the person that abused you over years and years. Of course, there will be a part that will want to harm that person. And so, what these people do sometimes, the news is like a son killed his mother, something like that. And most
Mhm.
people cannot fathom, how is this even possible? It's sort of like this. It's probably there has been severe abuse over years and years and years. And the person, of course, is not conscious of the anger, and they're probably still being abused. Maybe they even live with their parents. They're 20 or something, and they're so traumatized, right, that they can't even have a life, and they're kind of trapped there. And then the mother or the father, they keep abusing.
Right.
You're a loser, and you have to. So when that happens, they've experienced so much powerlessness that probably what happens is the rage comes in, but it comes in so powerfully that they commit a horrible act, and then they kill someone. So just to finish up, so those people, unfortunately, they actually did something in physical reality.
Mhm.
But I would say that everybody has that part deep, deep, deep in their subconscious. But it's very hard to access it, because first of all, you don't want to find out that there is that in you, because then that destroys your image that you're a good person. And it's scary. It's scary to see that. And you think, and then the thoughts are, I'm evil, I'm bad, I'm a psychopath, all these things. No,
Right.
deep, deep pain. That's it.
Wow. That's so insightful. It's actually something I've been working on personally, like lately. I actually said to my best friend was in town from Florida over the weekend. I forget what she said, but I said to her, I think I'm a lot meaner than people realize, like in my
Oh,
mind, just because I don't express it. But there's also a part of me that feels very guilty about that.
oh, yeah,
About those, like, if you want to call them like negative sides, like I can tend to be pretty judgmental
yeah,
um, towards myself the most, but also towards other people in the sense that like I feel like I can specifically see like what if I like get to know someone and talk to them, like I know exactly like what their issue is and what they need to do to feel better and feel happier. But then it's like, but then I ask myself and I'm like, well, why do I have the right to
yeah.
decide that on behalf of someone else? So it's definitely tough.
What do you say, like meaner and more judgmental? It's funny because on the one hand, these are all parts of the ego, right? It's like I like to describe it sometimes as you know how there's like multiple personality disorder, and then people
Yeah.
think those people are crazy. That's just an extreme version of what's happening in everybody's mind. So most people, they just have, it's like personalities. We really do have, all of us have personalities in the mind, but usually I think it's because of really severe abuse. The parts in the mind, they start to kind of have a life of their own. And then that's when people will literally have different names and speak and behave like, oh, my name is John. And then like the bodyguard part, which is supposed to defend the person, like they'll say I'm Matthew or something something like that, right?
Yeah.
So we all have these personalities, but for the most part, it's just we think they're moods and things like that. But if you look deeply, they really are like different people, and you can switch from one moment to the next. Um, but I was going to say something about the meaner and more judgmental. It's kind of like these personalities are you and they're not you at the same time. So it's sort of like a paradox, because
Hmm.
if you can watch them, then technically what's watching is not the parts, but at the same time you can't say that they're not you because it's a kind of like disowning. And so ultimately it is you. But it's funny because you can play with these things, and yet when you say I'm meaner and I'm more judgmental, I would say there are parts of you that can be that way. And so it's a confusing thing. It's like, what does this I mean? Because you know what, like now what I do is I can be all of those things because I still have an ego, there's still pain. And
Right.
so whenever these personalities come up, the only difference is that now there seems to be such a strong self-acceptance that there's almost no judgment for them. And so I can kind of play like I said before, like an actor. And it's usually for a few seconds. So if I'm driving and somebody's driving slowly, I'll just say whatever I want. It doesn't matter because nobody is getting hurt, right? It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is, or you'll have thoughts like, but that's exaggerated. No, that's kind of gone in me. It used to be like that for years, but now it's like this energy needs to be fulfilled. And so if it wants to say the meanest thing, it doesn't even make sense in the situation. That's what it needs. That's what you need to kind of release it. And so it's also like if you want to share a little bit more of your experience, because of certain moments when you feel mean and judgmental, because it's so fun when you don't take it too seriously. You see that it's not really you, and so you
Hmm.
can play with it. Why don't and you're not going to do it to people. If you're more aware, you're not going to do it so that you hurt others. You can always do it alone. Even if somebody turns around, you can do something for like a second or something, right? It's kind of crazy. I know it sounds like if
I
somebody
love it. I love it.
super angry and then they turn around, you can like mouth something like I hate you or something. And yet when they turn back around, you're not going to hate them. So it's like a complete, like it's a fluid sort of thing. It's like this character comes up and it's gone, and then I'm
Yeah.
back.
And so basically what you're saying is like you can release that in a way that doesn't hurt another person or animal or
Yeah,
whatever. And that way it doesn't get trapped in your body and build up to become one of those more extreme things like
yeah,
rage where you become taken over by it and everything.
yeah,
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna have to experiment with that because it's like immediately when I have like those um thoughts
yeah,
where like they can be mean or whatever it is, I immediately feel this like guilt. And that goes back to the judgment I have of myself for feeling those things. It's like this circle. But I also think that those are the things that are fun in a way. They are to me, it's fun, but maybe to someone that's not on this journey, they'd be like, "What the hell do you mean it's fun exploring
yeah,
these things?" But I think I told you when we talked before that I love getting triggered. Like
yeah.
I love it. It's just like, bam, here's this flashlight on something that you need to dig into.
It is even interesting to talk about the journey of like first you hate being triggered and then you like being triggered. That's also funny because part of the awakening journey is like the identification with the ego. So when you do have those parts come up, when you're very identified with them, you think they're you. And so the identification is sort of funny. So the personalities kind of live inside of your mind, and you usually like only certain parts. So the parts that you see as positive. And so when the mean one comes and the judgmental one comes, you almost think that that's not you. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why usually there's suppression and I'm going to ignore it. But yeah, again, I forgot. So
I don't get it because you get like so like engulfed like in the conversation, and it's like
yeah,
shit. What were we even talking about?
yeah.
This happens to me all the time too. Like just in my mind, like my mind will like
Oh
go
yeah.
off, and then I'm like, wait, where did this come from? But it's fun to explore those things, and I think that we were talking about how like we like being triggered.
Oh yeah.
Because that was one of the things that like captured my attention about your videos was I forget what the video was specifically. Oh, it was manifestation being an ego trap in itself,
Yeah.
and it triggered me. And then I was like, I like listened to your whole video, and I was like, damn, that's such an interesting point that I never even considered before. And so then I went down like a rabbit hole in your videos because I'm just like, this is so good. Because let's talk about that a little bit. Because obviously, manifestation, how you got started on your journey, I think it's like a step everyone goes through
Yeah.
on the journey. And there is still a part of me that like I find it very fascinating, especially with the sense that it is kind of linked to science in a way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I want you to talk about that. Like tell me a little bit more about your opinion on manifestation, especially because you were / I don't know if you still are like such a big Abraham Hicks fan.
Well, I definitely feel grateful for, her name is Esther Hicks.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, so let's see how I can talk about this. It's hard because it sounds like if you just say, "Oh, it's fake," and I'm not really saying that either. But one thing that I can say is, if you think about, I'm not even talking about manifestation like cars and houses and things like that, because like this moment is a manifestation, right? Anything is a manifestation. So
Right.
if you think about how there are people who go through so much suffering in their life and they actually never awaken, no matter how hard their life is, often they become bitter and blame everyone. And that's it. That's all that happens to them. Like it's not wrong, but it's a painful life, right?
Yeah.
And so imagine how that person never got to experience the awakening while they were alive. And then why do you and certain people? That's a sort of mystery of manifestation, if you want to call it, because why? So the only thing that I'll say about manifestation is the only reason I don't talk about it is because deep into my journey, I realized that I don't even know how to talk about it. It could be true. It could be destiny. It could be God's will. I don't know why some people manifest and others don't. But the funny thing is on my journey, the fact that I could never manifest anything like on such a extreme level meant that I had to keep facing my pain like nonstop. Because imagine nothing comes, right? When you when basically nothing that the ego wants ever comes, and you are a total failure to society and the world, and then it never comes, you have to keep facing the pain, right? And so some people, they are so fresh into their spiritual awakening journey, you can tell by the things that they're saying.
Yeah.
And then they will say things like, I saw this video, it was funny, this woman saying, I can manifest anything I want whenever I want it. I want this, there it is, like it's like a magic wand.
Right.
What I would say about that is that people that talk like that, they're suggesting that they somehow have a power and they're using that power, and others haven't gotten there yet, or they don't know how to use the power. But the funny thing is, in my perspective, it would be more like it was always meant for that person for that to happen to them, and it's actually part of how they will explore their suffering. You see, people think that manifesting everything that you want, it's a funny thing. It's how the ego thinks, right? You manifest that you want, and you're going to be so happy, and all of your problems are fixed. But that's a fantasy, because when you all of the pain is inside, and so when you get everything you want, at first I'm sure it feels like a dream, right? Everything, the person, the car, but then what's going to start to come up is the pain that you haven't looked at, and it doesn't matter how rich you are. I'll use an example. I've always come up with these funny scenario. So imagine that you are the richest man in the world, like Elon Musk, or somebody that's got like $400 billion. Like it's almost infinite, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to look at your pain. You don't want to look at your childhood wounds. You think that your relationship with your parents is fine, even though it's like completely just out of whack, and there's a million things not being looked at. And then now you have a wife, and so the scenario was, imagine that this billionaire is going to fly on his jet, and so he gets to the airport, and everything always seems to go his way because he waves the magic wand called money.
Right.
Everything, just everybody does what he wants, and he buys a $500 million yacht, and you can land a helicopter on it. So he gets to his plane, and something has happened to the pilot. So it's like maybe he got sick or something. And so this man starts to become enraged. How dare this happen to me, because I get everything I want always, right? So even if he could fix it with money, he could charter another jet, he could do whatever he wants. In that moment, you're seeing how this person is actually a prisoner. And they seem to have all the freedom. And then I just gave other little scenarios. He lands on his yacht, and then his favorite food is not there. Like there's a banquet of food that the chefs have created, but there's one thing missing. And again, he's in a rage, and he ignores his children, and on and on. He goes to buy something on the internet because he feels bad. He doesn't want to feel it. So he goes and buys another car. So it's an endless escape. And so when you can see it that way, the person is a constant prisoner, and they're using money and status all the time. It's actually a very painful life, because you're always trying to push down the pain all the time. You wake up and you're unhappy. I'm going to buy something else. I'm going to do this. It's a constant chase that never ends, right? So that went from manifestation to
right? So good. And you see it all the time with like people that are, if you want to consider it shopaholics or, overconsumption or whatever it is. I think most of us are accustomed to it. And it is a way, it's like a different version of drinking or smoking or whatever your vice is. So what you're saying is like a manifestation is something outside of you that you don't have or you haven't achieved or whatever it is. So it's a perpetual state of chasing, essentially.
Yeah. And I wanted to add one more thing, which is when I talk about these things, automatically people think I'm against material things, which definitely I'm not. I'm not against anything. It's just that the whole like quotations, like the whole manifestation, what would you call it?
Community.
And you hear about these things. That is the chase. It's not material possessions by themselves. So literally what could happen is you could have, let's imagine a spiritual journey where you never seem to manifest anything that you want. And then you're forced to look at yourself, and you go deeper and deeper, and it gets harder and harder, and you cry, and all of this stuff. Eventually, if you became much more free inside, you could start manifesting, meaning things are showing up in your life, but there's no more attachment to it. And this is actually another really wonderful thing that I want to talk about, because attachment is also not understood. So the word attached, literally like my hand, something is attached to it. Yeah. And so people think that if you remove the thing, you are detached, and that's not how it works.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about this. I'm intrigued.
So attachment, literally what attachment is to take something too seriously. And so there are two sides of taking something too seriously. So you take money, for example. When you take money too seriously, money is on our planet is always related to status and success. So when you have lots and lots of money, everybody thinks that you're the best, right? Like, look at this person. They can do everything they want. They can travel. And so let me just back up. I'm going to remember. So I just remembered. So to be attached to money. So let's say a man that is very, very rich, if he is attached to it, he takes it too seriously, which means it becomes a part of his identity. And that identity is I'm only kind to people that have the same money as me. And so I am very unkind to waiters because they make so little money, and I have companies. If I go into the washroom, the bathroom, and there's a janitor, I'm not even going to speak to him, or if he speaks to me, I'm literally going to be rude to him. That's to take money too seriously. So that would be attached to money. Mm-hmm. Now, it could be the same situation which is pretty rare, some people maybe think there's no person that's kind and rich, but there are. It's kind of rare because of money. Usually it's the case that they're not, because it's such a strong identity, but there are people that are kind and rich. And so in the same scenario, if a really rich man, it could be a billionaire, walks into the washroom and he speaks to the janitor like he speaks to a CEO or a friend of his that's also a billionaire, with kindness and respect, there is no attachment to money. So that's funny because people think, well, he has a lot of money, so he's attached to it. No, it's to take it too seriously. And there's one more like funny example that I remember. People watching, if you know the Indian teacher master Osho,
Yes.
he tells of this funny story, and he says that, I have no idea who this was. It could be like 2,000 years ago, but it was a guru pretending to be a guru. And he says, I'm so detached from money that I don't touch it. Money is dirty. Money is bad, right? And Osho says that is someone who is completely attached to money, because they take it so seriously that they think, I can't even touch it, or I'm gonna taint myself or something like that. It's dirty. So that's the same thing that I just said. It's like the attachment is inside. If you don't take something seriously, you can play with it, you can have it. Like you could have a nice car, suddenly you can't have it anymore, and then you have a simpler car, you don't really mind. That would be, you can play with it, you can do whatever you want.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think, hold on, how do I phrase this? Are there things in our like human life, our human experience, that we should be taking seriously? Or do you think with the alignment with attachment and detachment and all of that, that pretty much everything we shouldn't take seriously? And before you answer, I just have to show you this. I just created this new, I like design all my phone backgrounds for whatever I'm like focusing on at the moment. I hope this can show up. It says chill out and enjoy.
Yeah.
Because I was getting so worked up, in this like season of my life, because I was taking things too seriously.
Yeah.
And so I made this background on my phone to remind myself to chill out and just enjoy the moment.
So I guess it's interesting because your question was about taking things too seriously. So that's a great topic. So, so I guess the key word is too seriously. So what's the difference between taking something seriously and too seriously? Like, for example, I make videos that first I always say it's because I actually enjoy. That's the number one reason. And then the second reason, of course, is people are going to watch and maybe it can help them. And so, damn it, once again, in my mind, if you can remind me, I don't know how it's like, and it's gone like smoke.
The question was, how do you know, like, are there things that you should take in life too seriously, or is everything kind of somewhere in that middle ground balance?
Yeah. So I was just giving the example. So if I took what I do too seriously and I play the role of spiritual teacher, to take it too seriously is things like I'm a savior, right? The savior complex. I have to make these videos, otherwise people will be lost. That is an example of like in the ego. Good. And so it's like somebody could be afraid that if they don't post for a week, people are like in turmoil because they're not posting. And so another way that I could take it too seriously is to think that, I think I talked to you about this, that it's my mission, which is another thing, which is a spiritual ego. I've come down to the earth with a spiritual mission, and so I have to do this. And so I've looked at that, and I've been able to see that those are lies. And so I went back to that thing, which is I just do this because I enjoy it. And so that's sort of the difference between, but what does it mean to take it seriously, right? I'm not taking it too seriously. I'm not getting completely lost in my ego with that. But to take it seriously means I'm not trying to pretend. I'm not sharing information like trying to screw people up or confuse them. So it's coming from a very genuine place. So that's taking it seriously. But I think the word too seriously, it's when you get a little bit lost in the ego and you're not able to see that you're kind of believing the identity. So yeah, but there's also another angle. I'm not sure like what example, maybe you have an example of taking like life too seriously. Like you said, you were like, you made that wallpaper. So if you want to share, like, what were you taking too seriously?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I told you this, but my like regular day job is I work as a real estate investor for a company.
Oh, yeah.
So I source all my own deals. I buy properties for us to like flip and hold as rentals and stuff. And I've always been very at the top of my game, but we started this new department about a year ago, and the last month or so, I just like haven't been doing well and like getting deals and like bringing in money and like stuff for the company. And so I realized I was up in the middle of the night stressing and worrying about it. And I realized like this, I can't be like it's love my job, but like it's a job and there's more to life than just work. And so I wrote down in my journal, your work is not your worth. And that's kind of where all of this like stemmed from for me.
Oh, okay. What came to my mind is kind of like um, the whole stressing thing, which is the most common thing in the world. Um, it's sort of like you can't really stop stressing. So that's actually good to know because then you're stressed about the fact that you can't stop stressing
Yes.
later. And there's so many things that now looking back when things change, my entire life was that way, stressing and worrying and thinking about that. And it was only when I processed like a huge amount of emotional pain, mostly just sobbing, kind of endless sobbing over a long stretch of time. And still, even after that, it's funny to look back and see how slow, just like grass growing, even when I processed that over a year, it wasn't like after the year suddenly there was the change. It's still slow. It's like there's a period maybe of more integration where I still wasn't noticing a big difference, like in terms of feeling more peaceful and not worrying so much. So it's like it's so
Gotcha.
long. And so like what I would like to say about that is that if you're stressing, it's sort of like you can't stop, and it will become a little bit easier in the future as you keep kind of living your life. If you're going on a spiritual journey, it's literally tied to the emotional pain that is still not processed. And so it's good to know that, so that you don't like, if you're stressing, then maybe just let yourself stress. You're aware enough that you're going to stress a little bit, and then you're going to be aware and be like, okay, I've done it enough. And
Right. Like I let it out. I can like let it go
yeah,
now. Oh, I love that. That's so good.
I was going to say like one more thing
Yeah.
related to that. That's such a big part of the spiritual awakening journey is the lack of self-acceptance, which again is normal because we people often say like some funny things that I watch, and sometimes they trigger me a little bit. Like for example, if you don't have the life that you want, it's because you don't love yourself enough. And they're basically saying I've reached that level, and so you should do the same. And I said this in one of my videos. When somebody says that to you, they actually haven't reached the level that they think they have, because what they're saying is actually cruel, and it's not possible. You can't have a huge amount of emotional pain that's still yet to be processed, and suddenly just by thinking it over and over, you're going to love yourself and accept yourself in all moments. It doesn't work that way. And
Wow.
so I think it's good for people to hear that many things that you kind of worry about, especially like inner things, and you want to solve them, it sucks to hear that it might take a long time to solve them, but it's also kind of relaxing. It's like it's not going to be quick, and so maybe stop worrying about it so much. It's going to work itself out, but it's going to take time. And again, processing emotion. I've been able to see that literally it's emotion. All of our issues and problems is directly related to the amount of emotional pain that's still inside. And then literally by crying and sobbing, it just kind of disappears. But it's such a long process.
No, I'm with you, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think I'm like a big believer in like crying is releasing a ton of emotional pain. Um, I cry a lot, like a lot. But you notice that like after you're done, whether it's like a small cry or a big cry, like you do feel this sense of, I don't know if renewal is the right word,
Yeah.
but you feel a sense of release. And so, and this is something I think about like particularly with men, because we're socialized differently growing up, and men are taught to like stuff down your emotions, be a man, don't cry. What are you a little what all the things, right? And so I think it's really powerful when, whether they're like younger boys or teenagers or grown men, when they can allow those emotions to come out, I think it's really masculine, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's like really powerful. And it's just kind of like a bummer. I know I'm kind of like going off on a tangent now. See, it happens for me too. But my bottom line is I agree with you. And I think releasing emotions is really important, and never be afraid to cry, you know?
Yeah. And that's another like interesting thing, which is especially if it's very severe, like if a father, you know, the reason why the father would say that in the first place is because his father said that to him. So this is kind of generational trauma. The way that somebody is raised, that's what's passed down. And so the father never got to basically explore his emotions. He sees them as the enemy, because when he was around his father and he cried maybe for the first time, immediately he was, you know, maybe the father was even aggressive and said, never do this again in front of me.
Right.
And so what I was going to say about that is basically, especially when it's very severe, and the father thinks that he's doing a good job of toughening up the boy so that he becomes a man, that's literally the opposite of what he's doing. Because
Yeah.
if it's very severe, and it's I think it's not like everyone, but I think it's sort of common. A lot of fathers, they have that mentality. What that literally creates is a boy who thinks that emotions are bad, and then when they grow up, how are they going to treat their girlfriend and their wife? And so usually it's not, we all, men and women, cry and we have emotions, but sometimes women cry a little bit more, they have more emotions. And so in those moments, if the boy who is now a man never got to explore his emotions, he's literally repelled by it. And so that's why they will literally walk away. They will say, you know, you cry too much, which is terrible. And so that is not a real man. And so when the father was saying, I'm toughening up my boy so that he becomes a real man, does a real man act that way around a woman? No, right? And so that's also fascinating. It's like people think crying is for sissies or for whatever they call it, for weaklings. But in reality, that's what happens. And then,
So
and you,
powerful. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Yeah. I know. I feel like we could talk for like another hour about like the masculine and the feminine and all of that stuff. But I don't want to keep you for too long. Also, I didn't even realize I could see the comment section until a few minutes ago.
oh yeah,
Yeah, like
really see
people
it.
have been in here. So that's really cool. So guys, we're gonna be wrapping up here in a few minutes. I do have a few more questions for Steve. So if you have any questions while we're still on here, like post them in the chat comments. I literally saw them like, oh my gosh, yeah. People are like, is this live? Is this live? Yes, it is. So okay. Few questions for you. Um what is your, because I know you obviously do your sessions and stuff with clients.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a specific like target audience that you tend to work with? Or is it kind of just open to whoever's looking to like just talk more a little bit about like your sessions and like what you offer?
Oh, okay. No, I don't think I have a target audience, so it could be like anybody, any age, any gender. Um, oh, you want me to talk about like what I sort of in general, like what I
Yeah,
do?
like what do you do in case someone that's listening like wanted to work with you? Like what yeah, just tell us a little bit about that.
So I try to be like really upfront about it so that the person kind of knows what they're getting into. And so what I focus on, you know, I would say I don't do readings, I don't do anything like that. Um, it's for people that are very interested in looking. They have a lot of suffering and emotional work and all that stuff, and they want to be kind of guided. And the reason that I can kind of guide people is because I've done that over the years. I went from someone who is completely and utterly suppressed, never cried, never had any anger, and then a whole journey of going extremely deep into all of that. And so I can guide people through that. And so it really focuses on emotional, you know, I can talk about emotional suppression and then how to feel your emotions. And basically, yeah, and then when I do sessions, it's like this, it's an in-depth conversation. It's the best way to interact. And that's what I basically offer. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And if they wanted to work with you, do they just go to like one of your social media accounts, or like what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way is you would go on my TikTok, and I think in the main page of my TikTok, it's still, I don't have a website or anything. I'm not there yet, but basically it says if you want to book a session, you can DM me, whatever you prefer. Like there's an email button. You could also send me a message through Instagram. It's basically the same handle at Spirituality 101 and Beyond. That's on TikTok and Instagram. And so you could just send me a message. And then if you're interested, basically I send you an invoice through PayPal, and then we schedule the time and the date.
Awesome. I love that. And just so everyone knows, I do have the links to Steve's TikTok and Instagram in the description below. That's already there. And that's what I did. I slid into your DMs and like, hey, love your content. Want to chat? I don't know. Can you see the comments that are on here?
You know, I had it full screen here. No.
Okay.
Oh, I can see it.
People are saying thank you.
Somebody said I want to cry tonight.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize all these were here the whole time. And then I guess my last question for you.
Sure.
Is there a book that you would recommend? Like, do you have like a favorite book or something that you would recommend to people?
It's an interesting question. So probably for people that are sort of starting out, I think it would be A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, because I think he talks about the ego there. And it's like the first time that I even heard of the ego, and he explains it pretty well. And so it would be like A New Earth, I think would be the book.
I love that. Okay, awesome. Before we get going here, is there anything else you wanted to like chat about or say or anything?
Not. I mean, there's endless things we could talk about.
I know. We could honestly make this like a weekly thing and just go into like a new topic.
We could do that.
Yeah, I would love it. I mean, I think
right now.
Yeah, and I think we talked about like last time how it's just like I don't have a ton of people in my life that are on this same type of path. Everyone thinks I'm pretty damn crazy. So what's funny about that is in the very beginning, I really like cared and I was tiptoeing. I was in the spiritual closet for a while.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've gotten to the point where I just don't care. I don't care at all if anyone thinks I'm crazy. My mom gets a little nervous sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
She'll be like, you should like hold back a little bit. Like, I don't know what you're getting a little into some like stuff here. And I don't know about that. And I'm like, Mom, I've been like this for years now. You're just seeing it now.
Yeah.
But she does her best to be supportive. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and getting on here.
Pleasure.
I do. I feel like there's still just like so much more we could chat about.
Yeah.
So maybe we shall do this again then.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. We'll definitely chat soon. And like, again, everyone, if you want to get in contact with Steve, just hit the links below to contact him on Instagram or TikTok. So
thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.